what we are going to be doing today is walking through what is a HIT project outline, because what Hanson and I kind of noticed is that our students, not just you guys, don't feel bad, but like students in general, we're kind of confused about how to get the ball rolling on the creative process. Like, we've been doing all this research, we've been doing all this cool stuff. How do I get it? Easton! How do I get it started?
Well, I answered your question.
Okay. So what we created for you is a project outline. Now this is an example outline, which is why it has all this red and blue writing on it. Okay? So you'll notice like there's nowhere for you to fill in because it's an example. Don't worry, there's a copy that you can fill in. I will show it to you later. Where you will find this in the modules, you can find it in a couple of different spots. You can find it in that resource bank where we have like Noodle Tools, all those fancy videos to help you out. The Sim Blues in there, you know, it was that big grid of stuff. Or you can find it where it says Project Outline. We are going to have you turn this into Canvas at some point for Complete Incomplete, just so that we can kind of see where you're at. But here's what this document looks like. We're going to go through this big fancy color copy one first, so I can show you all the examples, what we're kind of looking for. And then I'll show you the student example, or the student version. So, regardless of if you are doing a paper or a project, it needs to contain the same content, right? The stuff needs to look the same. What this graphic organizer is designed to do is to help you kind of framework what this is going to look like. You don't want to just jump into this project and be like, I'm just going to start writing willy-nilly, or I'm just going to start creating something, and then have to backtrack and spin around. It's going to be chaotic. It might be controlled chaos, but this is designed to help you avoid that headache and help me avoid the headache of trying to help you make sense of the chaos that you have created for yourself. See where I'm going with this? Okay. So step one, the first thing that you need is an introduction. You, by the time we are done with this project, remember it's due March 22nd, by the time we're done, you will be an expert on your topic. At least you should be, because we'll have spent like 8 weeks with it at that point. You should be an expert on it. We can't expect the reader or the viewer to have the same level of expertise. So you need to provide an introduction. This is basic historical context, giving information about the time period that your specific event or topic takes place in. You're setting the scene. So for instance, if you were doing sports in World War II, which is the example that flows throughout this paper, you would want to give background about what people in the United States were doing during the years of World War II. How did the war impact the United States specifically? And what did people turn to for entertainment? World War II wasn't entirely doom and gloom. People still had fun. How did they do that? You're setting the stage a little bit instead of just jumping right into sports in World War II. Giving some context, giving some background. Regardless of what your topic is, whether it's D-Day, or medicine in World War I, or propaganda, or the USO, or the Berlin Wall, or the Cuban Missile Crisis. We need to have some context. That's what the introduction is for. Secondly, and this also remains true whether you are writing a paper or doing a project, you need a thesis.
What's a thesis?
Oh, Paul, what a great question. Extra credit points for Paul. Okay? But it's a concise statement of your argument, right? When you write a paper, of course, you need a thesis. This is short. It's usually a sentence long. This is what you are trying to prove and how your topic of focus ties to and relates to the theme, the overarching idea of global conflict and resolution. So the evidence and analysis that you're going to provide later should help prove the thesis, and the thesis should like unify the entire project, tie it up in a pretty bow. Okay? So an example thesis for World War II sports would be something along the lines of World War II had a major impact on professional sports in the United States by taking away key athletes that had joined the military, provided escape and entertainment for American citizens, and led to new innovations and improvements. Sentence long, but tells you what this project is going to teach you about. Questions about these first two boxes? Excellent. The next box is by far the biggest box, because guess what? It's the biggest part of your project. This is the main points. This is where you are providing evidence and analysis. This is answering the question of why. Why this topic is important in history. You need to clearly relate your topic back to the theme of global conflict and resolution. This is the majority of your project. I underline that because it's important. It's the biggest box because it's the bulk of what you're doing. You want to make sure that you provide enough evidence and analysis. You want to make certain that the evidence you include relates clearly to your thesis and makes the case for the relationship between your topic and global conflict and resolution. This might and probably should end up being multiple different points. Be sure to connect all of these points to your thesis and that concept of global conflict and resolution. What I mean by this, people who are on your phones, go ahead and put them away from me. Thank you. What I mean by this is you can't just jump around for the sake of having content in your paper or your project just to get to that length point. It needs to make sense. It needs to connect together, and that's an important component of what you're trying to do with these main points. So you want to provide quotes. You want to provide videos, images, graphs, charts, information that helps prove, connect, and explain the impact of your topic to that theme. Examples, providing specific examples. For our sample of sports during World War II, it might be quotes from specific athletes, it might be charts that show revenue before, during, and after, and it might be information about the innovation of baseball and the creation of the Women's All-American Baseball League to entertain citizens. So having direct quotes is important. And that should not be surprising to you at this point. But the bigger component, probably the more important component here, is the explanation. You can't just drop a quote in for the sake of dropping a quote in. You gotta explain it. You gotta tie it back to your thesis and your topic and the theme. So how are you gonna make sure that the reader will understand why a quote is in your project? So every single quote that you use, or every single graph or image or infographic that you reference needs to have an explanation written in your own words, explaining what the quote is about, how it fits to the thesis, and how it ties to global conflict and resolution. So an explanation for a quote is not what this quote is saying is blah, 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 blah. Okay? A good rule of thumb here is that your explanation should be at least as long as the quote that you are using. So if you have a 2-sentence quote in your essay, for example, you should have at least 2 sentences of explanation. You don't want to have a 7-sentence quote and a 1-sentence explanation, because that shows to me that you don't know how to tie this to your topic. And then there is an example quote with explanation. I'm not going to read that to you because it's a long paragraph. But you can see there's the quote itself, obviously starting and ending with quotation marks. Proper in-text citation, that's huge. And then in bold there, you can see the sample explanation, so what that could look like for you in your quotes. Last thing that you need is a conclusion. You're wrapping it up in a pretty bow. You're making sure that at the end of the day, the reader or viewer knows what you were talking about. You're summarizing up your topic in relation to the theme of global conflict and resolution, providing lasting impact. This wraps up the project. Restate your thesis, main focus, and topic. Remind the audience of the connection between your topic and the theme. Summarize the most important evidence supporting the connection between your topic and the theme. And when the reader or viewer is done with your conclusion, they should have a well-rounded idea of what your topic is and how it ties to global conflict and resolution. When we get closer to the due date, which is only 3 weeks away, we are going to meet in small groups. Granted, this class is small, so it'll probably be like groups of 4. And you're gonna very informally present your project to each other. Long story short, if the people in your group walk away and have no idea what your project was about, that's a huge red flag. Yes,
How do you present a paper?
so we'll talk about what that'll look like, but it'll be, you're probably not gonna read it necessarily word for word. We'll probably think of some kind of way to do it in a little more creative way, because that might be, especially if it's a group of 4 people reading 4 papers, could get a little lengthy. So, example conclusion ideas, sports in World War II, you can again see what that looks like. I'm not gonna read it to you. Questions about this? The beautiful thing about this sheet is that if you do this with your own information, obviously you're gonna be filling in the blanks, I'll show it to you in just a minute. It will be a perfect outline, or pretty close to perfect outline of what your project should look like. If you are writing an essay, this is basically a rough draft. And you can turn it into a final draft with some tweaking and some formatting and things like that. So, in the same spots in Canvas, in modules, you can again find it on that resource bank or where it says hit project outline. You will also find the student fill-in. This is the version that you are filling out. Notice it is exactly the same as the one that's sitting on your desk, except for the fact that it is blank. I took out most of the red and blue writing, and you're going to be putting in your intro, your thesis statement, your main points. We have 5 main points there for you. You might have more, you might have less. It's dependent on your topic and where you kind of see that going for you. And your conclusion, what that will look like for you. Last thing I have to say about this is that your teacher is a great resource for this. If you're sitting here and you're looking at these main points and you're like, I have no idea how to come up with 5 main points about the battle or the invasion at D-Day, ask me. I've written a lot of papers and I've helped a lot of students write a lot of papers. And we can help you do that. And that goes true, of course, for any of the 20th century teachers. Last thing I want to show you really quick before I give you work time is in the resource bank, which again, you can find the outline there, but there's also something new besides that in the resource bank. So if we scroll down to the bottom, here's the project outline, okay, cool, but also some tips and tricks for success. You want some advice on how you can make this project or paper the best you can, take a look at that document. Because myself, Mr. Hansen, and Ms. Vinji got together and we wrote out some tips so that you can do the best you can on this project. Any questions for me at this exact moment in time? Cool. So, what's gonna happen? I'm gonna take attendance, I'm gonna put on music, but the time is yours to kind of pick up where you left off. I'm gonna touch base with you, and we're gonna keep rocking and rolling, as it were, on this project.